So in this video, we're going to use Microsoft Excel to help us construct our frequency distribution table. And here we see we have all of the data collected from our survey. And instead of us scrolling through things manually, we want to use Microsoft Excel to help us with this. So I'm going to just create some labels here to keep track of what I'm actually finding from the table. The first thing I put here is count. I just want to count how many data pieces I have. So equals, anytime you type a formula in Excel, you start with an equal sign. That means you're telling Excel that you want the spreadsheet to do the work for you. So equals, count, it's going to count, look at the description here on screen, counts the number of cells in a range that contain numbers. It's not going to count the words, just the numbers. So count, parentheses, it wants to know the range. I'm going to click on the column A. That's the range. And remember, the description said it's only going to count the cells that contain numbers, not the words. Close the parentheses, hit enter, and it says there's 48 numbers here. And we can verify this. We see that this side of Excel counts the rows, so it goes from row 1 to row 49. But we see that row 1 is words, so take that one row away, and you go from 49 to 48. So we have 48 pieces of data, and that's what Microsoft Excel told us. Now, we want to find out what's the maximum value and what's the minimum value. So we'll do some formulas for that. Min equals min, parentheses, click on column A, close the parentheses. The minimum value in the column is 135. I see that right here. I want to know the max. Again, you start with an equal sign. That means you're telling Excel to do the work for you. Max, click on the column, close the parentheses, hit enter. That's the max value in our table. And now we want to set up some groups. So I need to know what's the range of values here. Range is equal to, I'm going to click on my max value, minus, I'm going to click on my minimum value, and hit enter. The range is 264. That means from 135 to 399 is 264 values. Because 264 ends with a 4, I know it's divisible by 2, it's divisible by 4, but it's also divisible by 6. So, or it's possibly divisible by 6. Because if I look at 6 times 4, that's 24, and we get a 4 here at the end. So those are the three numbers that I would look at here, and I'd say, well, if I want to divide this by 6, so equals 264 divided by 6. I'm telling Excel to do this division for me. I hit enter. I got 44. That's a nice number. It's not a decimal number. So if I want there to be 6 rows of data, each row would have to have 44 numbers inside of the group. So I could have done equals 264 divided by 4, and we see that would have given me 66 rows. I could have done equals 264 divided by, I don't know, maybe 24. That would have given me 11 rows. So I have different things that I could do with the math here. I'm going to settle on 244 divided by 6. I'm sorry, 264 divided by 6 is equal to 44. So I'm going to create 6 rows where each row has a width of 44. So in our presentation, when we were talking about grouped frequency distributions, we were saying, what's the width of each group? Well, I'm making the width of each group 44. Now we're ready to set up our table. So number of text messages per month. Make this a little bit wider. right? Number of text messages per month. I'm going to make sure everything is centered there. And let's bold it. Good. So my minimum is 135 dash, and I want to add 44 to it. Turn my calculator on. 135 plus 44, enter. That tells me that my range is going to go from 135 to 179. And now my next range can't use 179, it has to go up one. But now I want to add 44 to this. So 180 plus 44. $224. And I have to add 1 to that. At 44, you get 269. Add 1 to start the next row. Add 44, and we get 314. Add 1 to start the next row. Add 44, we get 359. Add 1 to start the next row. Add 44, we get 404. Now we see we've gone beyond the max. Our max was 399, but that's okay that we're above the max. The rows are 44 wide each, so that means they contain 44 data points. But because each row was 44 wide, and then I had to add 1 to start the next row, so there was no overlap. If we count here, this is 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. That was 5 times I had to add 1 so that I didn't have overlap. What's 399 plus 5? The 404. So it's okay that this went above the 399. We were concerned about keeping our rows equal in width of 44 data points each. So now just to format this, I want to center everything. And then I will highlight these rows, all borders, and I can narrow this up a little bit. So now I want to make a frequency column. So this is where we want to count how many times those data points occur. So how many times do we have data between 135 and 179? Now, I don't want to count through this by hand. That's why we're doing this with Microsoft Excel. So I'm going to give you the formula here. Equals count if, but I want to put an S on it because I have more than one condition. Count ifs. Where is my criteria range? We're looking at the data in column A. So I'm going to click on A, and then I'm going to put a comma, and now it's saying, what's the test? Well, the data has to be equal to 135 or greater than 135. So we put quotation marks, greater than or equal to quotation marks. That's the test. And, greater than or equal to 135, comma, and now I have to do my next test, which also comes from row A, comma, quotation marks. Now it has to be less than or equal to 179. Less than or equal to 179. Close the parentheses. You see that the formula is up here in the formula bar, if that gives you a better view of it. Once I hit enter, it went through all of the entire table and it said that only one data point fits here. Okay, let's do this again. Equals count if with an S, because I have more than one test to apply, column A, comma, quotation marks. My lower range is 180, so it's greater than or equal to 180, close the quotes, comma, back to column A. It has to be less than or equal to 220, comma, quotation marks, less than or equal to 224, quotation marks, close the parentheses, hit enter. I have two pieces of data here. Now, instead of me constantly typing this formula over, I can do a copy and a paste here. And I just have to come in here and change the numbers. So my low number is 225. So I'm 225 I'm changing. And then I have to come back over here and change the upper number to be 269. Enter, and I see I have 2 data points here. All right, let's copy and paste this again. Now I'm going to make the lower 270. And I'm going to make the upper 314. Enter. I have 12 data points in that range. I'm going to copy and paste. Let's change the lower to be 315. Let's change the upper to be 359. Enter. I have 18 data points in this range. And my last one, let's copy and paste. Change my lower bound to be 360 and my upper bound to be 404. And this way I didn't have to scan through this data by hand. It's a lot to look at, and I have all of my data here. The only thing I want to double check is all of my data here. I know that I first started by looking at a count of my data, and there's 48. So I just want to see that I have a sum of 48 here. So if I click right underneath here and I go to the auto sum and hit enter, it says 48 pieces of data, and that's just my double check. So I'm happy to see I have 48. It matches this number. I know all of my data is accounted for in this table. Now I can, make it look pretty if I want. It's good practice to have all of your different, every other row a different color. Makes it easier to read. And now if I wanted to, I can copy and paste this into a Word document or into a PowerPoint, and I have my frequency distribution table constructed. I used Microsoft Excel to help me with the tedious part of it, but here's your video. Again, watch it, pause it, take notes, use it to help you with your homework.